Discover the career of your dreams. Learn how to get your foot in the door, stand out, and create the life you desire. This is our time. This is our adventure. Together, you and I will explore the world, discover what's possible, and eradicate wasted potential from existence. I'm Siobhan Colleen. This is Industry Explorers. Before I ask you about your various roles with TAIT, could you tell our listeners about what that company is all about, keeping in mind that some of my listeners are still in high school, while others may be established professionals outside of the entertainment industry?
Sure. TAIT came up through rock and roll, is the short answer. If you're willing to broaden the definition of rock and roll to include the Backstreet Boys and Justin Timberlake and Taylor Swift and Katy Perry and Beyonce. But big touring. So TAIT really got to be known for their staging. We came up with a really brilliant modular staging product called MagDeck, which allows, and the rolling stage, which is what allowed for shows to take this leap from where they had pretty well crested out at the Van Halen era of exactly how much stuff you could actually bring on the road and put it into a building in a day and do a show and then get out in a timely fashion. The rolling stage and MagDeck and more attention to how things pack, that being as important as what they do on stage, allowed for this next jump that we're all still living through, where you start to see these insane machines out there in the world, like the Taylor Swift propeller or Justin Timberlake's bridge or Beyonce's Formation monolith. Those things would not have been possible in the 80s just because there were the staging solutions. Just you couldn't put that many people working on top of each other in the same place at the same time. So that's really where TAIT started to take off from. And then through a series of acquisitions, TAIT now also does automation. Obviously, Navigator is our proprietary automation platform. That's the world leader in how to precisely control automation for entertainment and live show control. And through that, we've just grown and grown and grown. We have a global footprint now. I should have studied before this. I can't remember how many offices we have, but the sun never sets on the TAIT empire. Between Lidditz and Las Vegas and LA and Orlando and London, multiple offices in London and Shanghai and Tokyo. We've got offices everywhere. We've got our fingers in lots of different pies. And nowadays, we don't just do rock and roll touring. It's a huge part of our business, but we also do permanent installs at theme parks, the big two, obviously, and others. And then we do a lot of permanent installs in facilities that are like performing arts centers. Like the city of Las Vegas is going to make a new performing arts center. We'll probably go put in the line sets, for example, or the stage lifts. And then other kind of wackier permanent install stuff too. A lot of corporate headquarters like to have fancy kinetic structures in their lobbies or have a really statement big meeting desk that maybe can move or have some tricks built into it. We do a lot of that stuff too.
I actually didn't know you guys did that. When you started with TAIT, you were a systems integrator. That sounds like a super complicated job that requires computer science or engineering degrees, but you have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in technical theater. What are the responsibilities of a systems integrator, and what should individuals study or practice in order to become one?
So that was a terribly titled job. Systems integrator sounds like an IT job, right? As you've just alluded to. It was not at all. Not even a little bit. A systems integrator was TAIT's first acknowledgement that, so the way it used to work back in the day before these things got so complicated is TAIT would build you a stage. The roadies would come to TAIT, work with the shop guys of okay, this is the specifics of this stage and you want to do it in this order. And we'll label all the decks and get all that stuff set up. And then the roadies would take it and go. And if, depending on a couple of little factors, maybe we would send a shop employee or two with them, or when something broke, we would send a shop employee. As the gigs got more and more complicated and more interrelated between disciplines, TAIT started a group of people called integrators, which these were people who fab would finish building the thing, and then the integrators would take it and integrate it into a show, right? So the staging guys would build the stage, and the automation guys would build the automation, and then the integrators would make sure they both play nice together before we take it to rehearsals. This is also around the time that we're not sending shop guys and gals all the time to the site. we're sending integrators because there's also this skill of now we have to go build the show. So we may need some intense fabrication skills. We might need an expert welder for this production. But more than that, we need people that have reps at building shows. We need them on site. So there's this pool of people called integrators. The systems integrator position was basically project crew chief, which is the next title on my TAIT rundown, which is what it got changed to. It was an acknowledgement that like, oh, now we're sending enough integrators in enough different disciplines that we need someone on site to be the site manager, to be in charge of all the integrators. And that was what the systems integrator position started as. Horribly titled, which is why like a year later, the job didn't change, just the title did, to project crew chief, which makes a little more sense. That is way more descriptive for what it was. And there wasn't a lot of us in that role. I think there were 3 of us, maybe 4. And everybody did it a little differently, which is one of the great things about TAIT, is that we don't care how you do most of this stuff. We care that you do this stuff. So everyone's left to play jazz the way they see fit. So all of us took on some different things based on what our expertise was. So while I was the systems integrator or the project crew chief, I normally got assigned to shows that had performer flying effects in them. And I would also be the integrator for the performer flying effect. So that would be my job to make sure that was all buttoned up and worked, and work with the performers and work with the automation programming team and the artistic people. And in addition to that, it would also be like, okay, and TAIT's call time tomorrow for all of us is what now? Oh, we need another rental car. I'll go deal with that. Those kind of logistic things to keep the team running. And so that, God forbid, if we ever got in a hairy situation, TAIT was speaking with one voice to the client or to the authority having jurisdiction or whatever the case may be, instead of being able to mommy daddy the 4, 5, 10, 15 people we would have on site.
And when you say the authority having jurisdiction, are you talking about city ordinances and state permits and, having to deal with the fire department and things like that?
Exactly. It depends from venue to venue and gag to gag about who you would be talking to, right? But New York City is a great example. The New York City Department of Labor shows up every time a show comes through, Broadway or like Justin Timberlake, I'm here for one night, and wants to go through any performer flying, any over the audience stuff that you have. And they want to go through and make sure that you've met their criteria. And you send them, a 3-inch binder of paperwork of engineering reports and design drawings and all this before you get there. But at the end of the day, someone's got to be the person to talk to the person from the New York Department of Labor. And this person is authorized to be like, no, you're not doing that tonight. And obviously that's not an outcome anybody wants, right? So that's what we're talking about. So that's a good example in New York. Other places it might be the fire marshal. Also in New York, the fire marshal might also have opinions and want to talk to you. But it might be the fire marshal. It might be state OSHA officials that have decided today's the day they're going to wander into the local arena. You never know. Anybody who. So that's why it's such a vague term, right? Authorities having jurisdiction. There's no fat on that bone. All 3 words are necessary, and it can mean a lot of things. And it's just being prepared to represent TAIT and or represent the production. A lot of times we would be the ones, we would get called in, especially in New York City. We would have opened a tour somewhere else, Kalamazoo, Michigan, or whatever, and they eventually make it to New York City, and we'll get called in to be like, hey, can you be here for that meeting? Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to.
Is it the responsibility of the production's legal team to know who all the authorities having jurisdiction are in any given region? Because I'm, as a rigger, I'm most familiar with authorities such as OSHA and the NFPA, which are, just a set of standards, and ANSI standards, which have jurisdiction in the United States. So, and of course, like OSHA in the United States, there's like a Canadian version, there's the Australian version of it. I can't recall exactly what the acronyms are and what they stand for right now.
Canada's CSA. I can't remember what it stands for though either. Like Canadian Services Administration, something. Anyway. Yeah, it's the short answer is yes. I mean, it's everyone's responsibility. Yeah, it's everyone's responsibility to know who has to sign off on all this stuff. The entity, the person or entity that normally really advances that stuff is the promoter. So if you are a small tour and the promoter is local everywhere, the promoter is the one that's going to be like, oh, hey, and by the way, Johnny from the Department of Labor is going to come by. What's a good time for you guys for him to come by, kind of thing. On the bigger tours, where the promoter is an organization like Live Nation, they're obviously plugged in every market, and they're cranking that out. And then also, of course, the tour managers who are actually out on the road with the tour, none of them are first time in that position by themselves. So they also, from experience, know, oh, we're going to New York. We're going to have to deal with these people. But tomorrow we're in Philly and it's not the same, or it's worse, or whatever the case may be.
I need to interview someone in those spaces so that we can take a deep dive on that sort of thing. But I want to reel us back into high performance rigging. What is it? And what is the difference between a project crew chief and project manager?
So project crew chief, as that last chunk would describe, was really about the on-site part, exclusively about the on-site part, and making sure we were delivering the product to the client and that the client was happy with the product and helping them create their show. That's really something you get with TAIT that you don't necessarily get with other vendors, is we intend to be your partner in creating your show. It's not enough for us that like, yep, we delivered the winch and the winch goes up and down and God bless, good luck, hope it goes well for you. We want to help achieve your artistic vision, even if that means the thing that we've prepared is exactly what everybody said they wanted. It's not the right thing. Great, let's get the right thing. And how do we make all those logistics happen? Go, go, go. Because as we all know, or as we all may recall pre-COVID, these shows are all sold out. There's no, oh, we'll open a week later. That's not an option. That's not a thing that's going to happen. So it becomes it also, part of Project Crew Chief becomes what is the solution right now? What is the solution tomorrow? And what is the final solution that might take a week to execute on, so that you keep the ball rolling, right? Don't bring the train to a halt. It's hard to get the train going again once you stop. We can slow the train down, but don't stop. So project manager is the entire length of a project, of which on-site is part of it. So a project manager at TAIT is responsible for the initial bid of a project, the contracting and the contracting terms, shuttling that project through the design process, through the fabrication process, through the in-shop integration process, which is called factory acceptance testing, dealing with shipping, and then being overall, the on-site is part of it, right? So the project crew chief, for example, would report to the project manager in that instance. And high performance rigging was a silly term we came up with because we felt performer flying was too specific, because we didn't do enough of it at the time for it to be its own job. So we had to come up with a term that also meant and big heavy rigging that scares people. So we called that high performance rigging. And that's what that term meant for the time that it meant. You might be gathering like job titles at TAIT are kind of developed in the moment. And that has been true to date. But that's also a reflection of one of the great things about TAIT, which is there's not a sincere hierarchy as there is at like a mega corporation of like, oh, well, managers in your title, but directors in your title. Like, no, we put the right people in the room for the problem and we go solve the problem. It doesn't matter what the titles are. The titles are really more of an HR situation of like, who's approving your vacation? Who's approving your timesheet? More than it is like, well, my boss said that my boss disagrees with my opinion, so I'm going to sit here and be quiet. You'll be shocked to hear most people at TAIT are loud type A people.
I think that's really awesome. You guys sound like you empower each other and you value each other as a team.
Extremely. Extremely. I mean, it's a big family, right? Like we don't always agree. We don't always get along.
People in corporate America hate that term. They're like, oh, stop calling it a family because you don't care about me. But, it sounds like it's actually true for TAIT.
Yeah. I mean, it's a team sport. It's a team sport. No one can do these things by themselves. It's not possible because everything's too integrated. You need subject matter experts in these various places to get it to mesh together like a nice gear or like an enzyme. So it's a team sport. It can't be done by yourself. So stop pretending that it can be.
Absolutely. How does your scope of responsibility change from project manager to senior project manager?
Well, we get bomber jackets once you become a senior project manager. So that's pretty cool. No, that's not true. This is another kind of HR kind of title. The senior project managers, the way it currently works, and it's ever evolving at TAIT is the other thing, but the project managers and the associate project managers, which we now have, are grouped into what we call pods, and a senior project manager is in each pod. And that really is about distributed HR command and control, which I don't want to use the word control actually, because that sounds terrible, but it's about like ways to get messages out. right? Like, hey, COVID's a great example, right? When TAIT said, okay, project management doesn't need to be in the shop anymore. This is like, late February of last year before it really got bad everywhere. TAIT decided if you didn't have to be at the shop, work from home. The way that information got distributed was, executive leadership made a decision. The director of project management got told all the senior project managers, and then all the senior project managers met with their pods to disseminate that information. So that's really what it's about more than it is anything else. And then again, like I approve my pod's timesheets every week. You know what it is? It's about distributing the workload of HR among other people. So approving timesheets, approving vacations, and then there is a little bit of a leadership aspect of it, of the senior PMs and up meet to try to look at where we're going, what the future of the department is. Do we need to hire more people? What software should we be using? Stuff like that. Again, always with input of the team, but you can't always put 40 people in a room together. It's not a productive conversation. So, but from the project execution standpoint, there's very little difference between a project manager and a senior.
So does each pod have their own project that they're focusing on?
It depends, right? So we very intentionally shuffle the deck of who's in which pod often so that the pods don't end up being specialized. It's not as though my pod only does performer flying or only does theme parks. And it's not as though Phil Mitchell's pod only does staging things or only does rock and roll. We very intentionally keep moving people around because we want everyone to learn from each other. We don't want to develop bad habits in a group. And we don't want one group to develop awesome habits and then be siloed in their group. That's terrible. That's actually worse than the bad habit one. So we are constantly shuffling it around. So again, the pods are just about distributed HR control and that workload than they are about, this person in my pod's available and they'd be great to work on that project that Phil's the senior project manager on, but too bad that she's in my pod. That's not how that works, right? Like reporting structure, this is one thing TAIT's great at. Reporting structure on a project is not related to reporting structure organizationally.
What do you mean by that?
There have been times, and there will continue to be times, this is the best example, where an associate project manager in the organization is the person in charge of a project. And I, as a subject matter expert in performer flying, may be brought in to this project to help out. But I am reporting in this project to this associate project manager who organizationally I outrank, which is another term I hate, but I outrank that person. But on this project, I'm reporting to them. They're the boss on this project. Organizationally, we have this other structure, right? And we're very adept at those things are exclusive to each other. It doesn't matter what your rank is in the organization. It matters on a project what your rank is on the project.
I think in the book Dichotomy of Leadership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, they talk about how sometimes a leader needs to lead, but they also need to know when to follow. And I think that's an excellent piece of advice, right? And that's what it sounds like when you talk about the difference between like a project hierarchy versus the organization, or not hierarchy, but like the project structure versus the organization structure.
Yeah, the other terminology we use is that one's job title is separate from one's role.
Oh, does that prevent people from adopting the attitude, oh, that's not my job. Oh, that's not in my job description?
I think TAIT culture generally prevents people from adopting that. We on the rare occasion that we make that mistake of hiring someone with that attitude, they tend not to last very long because that's not a thing that we find acceptable in any way. So yes, I'm sure that structure, that willingness to flip that switch helps with that. But that's a broader TAIT thing. Only a handful of times has someone said to me, that's not my job at TAIT, and they were very rapidly not on my project.
Well, yeah, take a lesson here, kids. Don't ever say that. Don't ever say, well, that's not my job. When did you get your ETCP arena and theater certification? At what point did you feel that that certification was valuable?
Yeah, I got them both pretty quickly after they came out. Cannot possibly quote the year for you, but I remember I was still with Cirque at the time because I remember it being a real pain in the butt to get to an H&R Block to take the test in whatever city I happened to be. So yeah, I got them pretty well in the beginning. My theory at the time was very self-serving, which was, well, this is a thing. It's going to become more of a thing. The test is probably going to become harder over time. I might as well just get in now on the ground floor when it's A, cheaper, B, less people are taking it, and C, hopefully the test is easier than it will be later. And so I did them both. And it's been valuable for sure. As time has gone on, more and more bids are coming out with the requirement that the rigging be done by people with ETCP certifications. So this is exactly what you would expect to have happen, right? The day it came out, nobody cared about it as an industry, as safety people. The more that people find out about it, and the more that organizations like Disney and like Cirque du Soleil and IATSE embraced it, the more it becomes ubiquitous, and then it becomes a bit of a scarlet letter not to have it. So yeah, it's come in handy tangentially that way. And when you're ETCP certified, you're on their website, and I would say maybe twice a year I get a call, as long as we broaden the definition of call to include, emails or texts or Facebook messengers or whatever, of like, hey, I found you on the ETCP website and you're like in my area, are you interested in helping out with the thing? And, and then it's up to the individual. So that's always a fun way to stay connected with people that are not at this tier in the industry that TAIT is, that need help and that are local. Like I love helping out a high school that needs like, hey, we have a counterweight rigging system and we don't really know how to use it. Like nothing makes me happier than going and helping them.
Yeah, absolutely. For our non-entertainment industry listeners, can you explain what ETCP stands for and what the program is all about?
I hope I'm right. I believe it stands for Entertainment Technician Certification Program.
Mm-hmm.
CEO's nodding. Great. Good news. It was started specifically for rigging. It was an acknowledgement that there was no rigging certification in our industry, in the country. And even internationally, in Australia, Australian riggers like to say, well, I'm a certified rigger. Well, you had to take a crane rigging class and test. The fundamentals apply to bring that full circle. But also let's not pretend there aren't things unique to theater that have nothing to do with a crane, right? So point being, even the international certifications out there didn't have anything to do with entertainment specifically. So a working group got together with all the names you would expect, all the big companies and the Bill Sapsises and the Eddie Raymonds and all these people got together and made a test and got it through, I can't remember the word, accreditation, got it accredited. And the way it's administered, and that's what the fees for the tests go to cover, by the way. Like, nobody's making any money on those tests, let the record show. That's just to continue to feed the administrative side of how to keep the test real and to keep changing the questions and all that kind of stuff. So, it was started, I think the theater one came out first, although I'm prepared to be wrong about that. But one of them came out first, and then like a year later, the other one came out. And it's a great general knowledge rigging test. As with any, taking the driver's test doesn't mean you know how to drive. Same thing here. Taking and passing the rigging test doesn't mean you're the safest rigger in the world, but it also shows a base of knowledge, right? And that's a great thing to have. And that's where it came from. And again, now you're seeing more bids come out with that as a requirement of people who are going to actively be rigging. In the many years since then, I think it's been around for 15 years now. They've also added some for various electrical certifications. I think I'm not an electrical guy, so here will be the most ignorant thing I say all day. I think there is a little power one and there's a big power one that you can go take.
There's like a portable power distribution one.
I don't know. There's a couple of electrical ones, point being. And I think there's another one coming, and I can't remember what the topic of it is. But at any rate, ETCP, great organization put together by the right kind of people with they're driving to in my opinion, the correct point on the horizon. In the foreword of my book, I argue that we need a third rigging certification, which is automated rigging. And, that's a thing I just keep saying and hope that other people take care of that and make it happen.
I was absolutely going to ask you that question because I knew you were going to go there. And I've asked Bill Sapsis about why we don't have something like that. And it's because it is very expensive to have an accredited certification. I think one number that stands out is like $250,000 to get started or just to get the right paperwork. I mean, it is expensive. Yeah. And that's why these tests are like $600 to take.
Yeah. And Bill is totally right. Right. I'm certainly not trying to argue that like this should exist and there's no reason it shouldn't. No, I mean, we're a niche industry.
Yeah.
And now to have a niche test in a niche industry, I mean, one could argue having a theater and arena test is already kind of too niche. Now, I more than agree that those are two very different sets of math and two very different sets of skills to have. But I think, as I say in my book, too many of the big companies have segregated automation and rigging from each other. And some of them draw a really hard line. Cirque du Soleil, in fact, the rigger is in charge. The automation team is in charge of the winch back, and the rigging team is in charge of the cable on the winch going out. Mm-hmm. And that really, I don't blame them. They're a giant corporation. They have to have these rigid lines and divide people. But certainly my time at TAIT, as we go through various structural reorganizations, more and more I'm convinced that hard lines on an org chart are always the problem. Org charts should be drawn as clouds where people's sphere of influence overlap each other. Mm-hmm. So you know a little bit about what goes on before what you do, and you know a little bit about what goes on after what you do, and your real sphere of influence is in the middle, right? Riggers rig. But riggers also need to understand more about how the automation works. And automated people, when you segregate the two groups, automation tends to be only people sitting behind a computer. There's a lot of real physical mechanical stuff with automation too. And we need everybody to be a more one big homogenous group than mm-hmm. right now where we're two completely segregated groups. And that's the argument that I tend to make.
I think it's a fantastic argument. And the day that an automated rigging ETCP certification comes out, you bet your butt I'm going to take that.
Yeah, I hope I can pass since I'm the one advocating for it.
You're going to write the test, Jim. I mean, having to take that test for automated rigging would force me to learn have a base level knowledge of automation. And I feel that I can go back to my experience at Cal State Fullerton and know that there's certain things that are important to know. But if it were like a professional certification, accredited, then I would feel like, oh, okay, so this was written by professionals who do this every day. So this is like absolutely without question what I need to know. And let's dissect this a little bit, right? So for example, the Arena Entertainment Rigger certification for ETCP has three main parts that you need to know. There's the planning and engineering. I've got it in front of me, so no worries if you I do not have this memorized. I am not that impressive. It's in front of me right now. So number one, planning and engineering. There's installation, and then there's materials and equipment. Within planning and engineering, you need to know formulas and forces. You need to know general principles of rigging, and you need to know about drawings, how to read blueprints, essentially. Within planning and engineering, what would you include in the automated rigging certification? What would be some things that someone needs to know within planning and engineering?
That's an awesome question. Definitely. I would imagine you're going to get mostly riggers taking this test. So just like the arena one has a working ability to read blueprints, this one needs to have a working ability to read electrical schematics. So that would definitely be one. I would add, we would expand on the forces thing. The most the arena gets into dynamic forces, at least when I took it, was the bump factor on a chain motor, which is crucially important to arena rigging, but barely scratching the surface for automated rigging. So I would want to see a lot of understanding around the different flavors of e-stops, as I call it, category 0, category 1, category 2, and how those various stops apply different forces to the system, to the load, and to the facility, which are three different things. So those would be really important. And then also probably in that forces section, like understanding harness selection, for performer flying, and how those various stopping modes affect forces on the body being transmitted through the harness. A lot of times we think of the body as just a free body on the end of a line for the sake of getting the math done, and that's good. But then we also need to think about exactly how we're transmitting that force into the body from the winch or whatever machine you're using. It's probably so those. And then on the planning side, I would also, the concept I hit on in my book, the safe sandbox. Being able to plan ahead for how limits and stopping distances are going to affect your actual available area in which you can.
You should have a workbook that, hey guys, by the way, Jim is a published author, and I was going to ask about the book a little bit later, but since we're lightly talking about it now, Jim, I think you should write a workbook for your book. And yes, the sandbox analogy in your book was absolutely perfect. I'm trying to remember, you also had like a scenario, the arena, and say someone wants a performer to do like a 360 or to be able to fly in different parts of the arena, like Pink, right? So you have to, it's not like you can go from one edge all the way to the other edge. You have to go down, and find the actual flight space that's available. So is that also part of the sandbox principle?
Yes. The short answer is yes, right? The whole idea of the sandbox thing is don't overpromise and underdeliver. Do the opposite. Underpromise and overdeliver. Because I don't know about you, but never in my career have I told somebody I'm only going to be able to do X. And when I show up, I can do more than X, and I got yelled at for being able to do more. That has never happened. Never, not once has that happened, right? The opposite, yeah, that's happened, right? The idea, so the safe sandbox really is about setting your limits correctly, and if we plan it out and we do it right, we can effectively communicate where we're going to be able to fly. And then when we get there, if we set it up correctly, we're going to, 70% of statistics are made up on the spot, and here comes one of them. By setting up the safe sandbox correctly, we're going to prevent 80, 90% of just dumb accidents, of accidents that were 100% preventable, right? If we put all our limits in the right place, you can't fly the performer or the static object. It doesn't have to be a performer in this case. You can't fly the video wall into the side of the theater because you set the limits up right. It's not possible. So you've prevented the opportunity for that. The understanding your flight envelope for a 3D rig is what you're talking about, and understanding that those ropes always connect. And if there's a delay tower, for example, in the stadium, and you want to get over here, well, this rope that needs to go through this tower to get there isn't going to be able to do that. So it is very critical to understand that those ropes always connect and make sure that the space you're drawing that you can get over the arena is actually achievable. Part of that is also limits, but generally speaking, in a 3D rig, the limits are not going to be your most limiting factor. Doesn't excuse you from setting them up right, but they're not the thing that's going to limit you. What's going to limit you is the other stuff in the room that's going to be in the way. So that is part of setting up the safe sandbox, so that you're probably not going to set a physical limit on a winch to prevent you from coming too far this way and having the rope hit the tower. You're going to set up some digital software limits, and setting those up will keep you from getting into a dangerous position in the.
Yeah, the flight envelope for a 3D rig was what I was thinking of. And I think that would be excellent to include in an automated rigging test.
For sure.
Those that would all, the whole sandbox thing, and then the flight envelope, those would be excellent test questions.
Yeah. I mean, the real jump if you want to zoom out far enough, the real jump from the theater and the arena certification to a mythic, hopefully future automated rigging one is in theater and arena, you can really think about things in 2D. You can think about them in plan view, or you can think about them in section, and you can get by on that. When you start talking about automated rigging, these things become three-dimensional objects, right? The flight envelope of a lift travel rig in a theater is a 2D object. It is a section view, it is a front view, and this is where we're going to be able to fly. When you start talking about 3D rigs, it's a 3D object. It's X, Y, and Z. And you need to understand it as a 3D object. So you kind of have to think through that. That's really the logical leap to take that next step.
So another part of the arena rigging that's required for people to know is layout and electrical, rigging attachments, and operations. So what kind of test questions would you include in the automated rigging certification?
So yeah, it would be the second half of everything we just talked about the safe sandbox, right? Like one thing is being able to put it on paper, and then the other thing is understanding how to execute it. So I think it would be wise to have a lot of questions of like, how do you determine the stopping distance of your rig in a category 0 e-stop or a category 1 e-stop, and set up a couple of questions that are, okay, here's the scenario. This is how fast this thing can go. This is the ultimate limit is going to be a Cat 0, and the initial limit is going to be a Cat 1. And this is what those stopping distances are. Can this work, right? You're going to be moving this fast. You're going to hit these limits. What's going to happen? Is this safe? I think there'd be a lot of questions like that. And then certainly on the electrically, there's any number of great places to go about torque limiting based on current draw, and is it okay to peak over your max rated motor amperage and for how long, and lots of deep rabbit holes we could fall down there. And then there's, on the operations side, a lot of the performer relationship stuff that I would include. Now, that gets to be very performer flying. You don't necessarily have to have a good working relationship with an inanimate object that you're flying around.
But you do with the technical director or the artistic director or the producer or any stakeholder.
Absolutely. So I think there'd be a lot of great questions around how to operate. What are non-starters? What are the things? What is the checklist of things that we must do before we start running around at full speed? And under what circumstances do we go, okay, stop, get the sandbag. We're going to fly the sandbag around. We're going to make sure this is safe. Okay, now put the priceless piece of scenery back on, or the priceless human being back on. And I think we did a lot of great questions around that aren't covered in the theater or the arena.
So the third part of the arena rigging certification requires knowledge of materials and equipment. The two parts underneath that are personnel access equipment. So that's all your lifts, your ladders, your rope access, your fall protection, PPE, and then rigging materials, such as truss, chain hoists, hardware that we use. What other materials and equipment should you have knowledge of if you were to take the quote-unquote automated rigging certification?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to do parts of a machine, which is another chunk of my book, right? Of identifying what the parts of the machine are, why they are important, what kinds of motors, why, what kinds of drums, why, under what circumstances is the wrong answer to the previous question acceptable, how many brakes, why, how many limits, why, how are the limits wired normally open, normally closed. I think that's a big part of it. Also, probably a lot of resultant forces, which maybe would go back in that first category, but a lot of, okay, so great, the winch can take it and the person can take it and the rope can take it. What about the shivs? What about the roof? Like, are we attaching flexibly or are we attaching rigidly? Neither is always the right answer. So like, why? This is where we would get into a lot of open-ended questions, I think. Also, this is where you could get into when is it appropriate to use steel wire rope versus synthetic wire rope, and how would you terminate those and why? And a lot of specific materials to automated rigging. Again, you could get into harnesses a lot. You could get into different ways to clip into harnesses. Why are they better? Why are they worse? Things like that. I mean, that would be it would be hard to whittle down the questions in that section to be few enough to put in a test, I think.
So as these ETCP tests are right now, it's all multiple choice. Do you think it would be beneficial for the automation or the automated rigging certification? I keep talking about it as if it exists, but I'm pretending like we're building it right now, right? Let's say we're building this certification test. Do you think it would be beneficial to have a few questions that were not multiple choice that you had to actually type in or write in your own answer? Because a lot of this, the answers for a lot of situations are, it depends. It depends on this. It depends on that. So again, do you think it'd be beneficial to have written in questions?
I think it would be great. That being said, if we all know how almost preventatively expensive it is to set up the tests that we have currently, and knowing that those are multiple choice, which means they can be graded by a computer like that, I can only imagine what the expense would be to add open-ended. So it's probably cost prohibitive to do so, but that's just a challenge to write a better multiple choice question.
Definitely. I was thinking, we'll just have a ESTA, we'll have like a what do they call it? Like a task group dedicated to this test that grades the answers.
That would be great. The downside is everyone on those task groups has day jobs too.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about some eligibility requirements. The ETCP requirements. You have to be 21 years old. You have to have 30 points in order to apply. Now, 30 points, how do you get points? You get points through work experience. 1 point for every 100 hours worked. And you can also get points if you have an associate's degree or an undergrad degree or a graduate degree, but you have to accumulate a total of 30. Would you change those requirements in any way? Would you make any adjustments if it came to an automated rigging certification?
I don't think I would. I think I really like, one of the things I've always been impressed with is how hard they hit that ball out of the park with the first version of it. And it's never changed to my knowledge. It's always been that from the beginning. I would hope that we could have leniency around the work experience needs to be any rigging experience, that it doesn't have to be automated rigging experience, because it's, again, it's a niche thing. And this would be a certification that would hopefully help people get into it. So for me, if you're a working rigger and you're studying on the side to pass this test, that works for me. I don't need to know you were a winch tech at a shop like TAIT or others where the winches are coming in and like, no, I scrubbed drums clean for a year and a half and I got all my points and now I can take the test. Like, that's not important to me. It's more important that you're just a working rigger. You're around, you're having a tactile experience with these objects that we work.
You are a published author. You created Automated Performing Flying, the state of the art. And this book shares the secrets of performer flying in entertainment history and provides step-by-step instructions on how to create a performer flying effect from scratch. Give us some of your book's highlights.
Yeah, I mean, the goal was to create a book that would equally be palatable to the dad running the fly rig at the high school production of Peter Pan as it would be for the teams at Cirque du Soleil and Disney and other people that are flying people every day. And that's quite a broad audience to hit. But, a lot of people, even in those at the higher end of our industry, learned by doing and maybe missed the opportunity to have learned some of the fundamentals. So, every chapter, we go through the life cycle of a performance. So the first chapter is, should you even do this? Should you move on to performer flying from not performer flying? And should you do manual or automated? And, again, the answer to all these questions is, well, it depends. The book very intentionally does not say this is how to do a thing. The book very intentionally is an education of the variables that you need to understand with which you can go make the decision of what is appropriate for your specific application this time, because the answer changes every single. So we go through design and fabrication and testing, and we go through different types of rigs, single axis, 2-axis, 3D rigs, V rigs, the like. We go through different kinds of ropes and why you would use them. We go through different kinds of harnesses and why you would use them, different kinds of circus apparatus and what they're used for. We talk a lot about the difference between performer flying and automated rigging. And we do rescue, if I haven't already said that. And then we do a whole chapter on performer interactions, performer relationships, and that is as critical, if not more. Again, perception is 9/10 of the law, is my favorite intentional misquote. With the performers, the whole rig can be flawlessly safe, but if they don't feel safe, doesn't matter how safe it factually is. They also need to feel safe, and that is part of your job as the automation and or rigging team.
That's excellent. If this isn't already a book that's part of your curriculum, because it should be, go read it. Go read Automated Performer Flying if this is something that you're interested in, because those are some really solid fundamentals that everyone should know. All right. So you are also a licensed private pilot. I have but one question for you. Who, what, when, where, and why? It's so cool and random. So just real quick, like, why?
It was a motivating factor throughout my life has been, that seems cool, and they don't let everybody do that. How do I become somebody that they let do that?
That's how I became a rigger. Hey, that looks cool.
There you go.
How do you do that?
Yeah. And flying a plane became one of those things. There's also a turn of phrase that I use a lot of, like, it was the next thing on my James Bond license. There's that. And also at TAIT, there's actually a small handful of, more than you would expect based on our population, of people that are private pilots. So ended up, people would be like, oh yeah, I'm going to fly a plane tomorrow. Like, you're going to do a what? Yeah, I'm interested. Tell me more. So it was a thing I did while I was insanely busy on I did it while I was writing the book and while we were working on the Taylor Swift Reputation Stadium Tour, and then later the Bourne Stuntacular that is at Universal Orlando. So it was a lot to do all at once, that's for sure. But it was awesome. It was one of the most challenging and most rewarding things I've ever done. It was really, really hard and really, really awesome.
That's super cool. So do you still have that license? It sounds like it's really recent.
Yeah, I got licensed in 2018, November of 2018, I think. I'm pretty sure that's true. And yeah, my license is currently out of date because I haven't flown in a while, but I still have it, and I have to go up in a plane with an instructor for like an hour, and then it's live again. It's very common. You have to renew it every 2 years, and I missed my thing because of COVID. But yeah, no, I still absolutely have it and intend to continue to use it.
Was it an expensive certification to get?
Yes.
How much was it?
About 10 grand is what it's going to cost you. And that's between all the books you're going to want to buy and the classes. And when you're in a class, you're renting the instructor and renting the plane. So that starts to crank up real quick. And then it's about how quickly you become proficient at everything. But 10 grand seems to be about a pretty good average number that you can take. And then it depends geographically where you are. I'm sure it's more expensive to rent a plane in LA than it is in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, for example.
Yeah. Well, there you go, kids. You need to be financially literate so that you can drop 10 grand on becoming a licensed private pilot. How badass is that?
It's pretty great. I one of the many things I wanted to do was, my parents live in Connecticut and my wife Trisha's parents live in Maine, and driving around I-95, if you're not familiar with the East Coast around the holidays, is a fate worse than death. So among many things I wanted to get out of this was the ability to fly over all the traffic instead of driving through all the traffic. And there are few things as enjoyable as flying over I-95 when it's jam-packed bumper to bumper and you are still moving. It is wonderful.
Rad. Who is considered one of the greats in your industry?
Oh, wow. Are we talking specifically about rigging, I guess?
What's your industry?
Well, I mean, we straddle a lot of different stuff, right? Obviously, if we're going to talk about creatives, that's a very different conversation than technical people. I mean, the Harry Donovan, of course, who wrote Entertainment Rigging, was, one of the first people to write this stuff down, certainly. Jay Glarum, who wrote, oh my God, I forgot the name of Jay's book, but it's the theater version. It's the book you should read before you take the theater ETCP exam. I can't remember the name of it. I Stage Rigging, I think it's called. But Jay Glarum, the Sapsis brothers, Bill and Mike, have done a lot for the industry. So that's where I would go with rigging. And if we were going to broaden it to automated rigging, I don't think anyone's done more than Scott Fisher. He is the reason Navigator exists. He's the reason Spider-Man on Broadway happened and was as impressive as it was technically. Scott did more to advance the automation industry than any single person, in my opinion. The entertainment automation industry, and a lot of those names are still alive or have been alive recently, and that speaks to how quickly the industry is advancing. But those are definitely the names I would pick. Certainly, as we're talking about rigging and automated rigging, that's it for me.
Who would you include if you expanded the scope?
I think then, and this is probably a product of the amount of time I've spent in project management now, but I think then you get into a lot of some of the most impressive executives in the entertainment space. Some of the stuff Bob Iger did at Disney is amazing. Now, yes, it's easy to be the best when you have a seemingly limitless pile of money from which to draw and buy interesting companies. But still, some of the things Bob Iger did, and Michael Eisner for that matter, like Disney's growth from really Walt Disney's personal theme park to where it is now, and the executives that helped with that, that's incredible. And then if you're speaking more about technical theater, there's a lot of incredible, quote unquote, small business owners. The team that owns TAIT, Winky and Adam Davis, and Michael Tate before them. That is an incredibly interesting story, and the impact they've had on our industry through the company that they have given us is, irrefutable.
I love it. Thank you for including so many names, and for including people not just within automation or entertainment rigging. I think it's important for people to know that you should expose yourself to different industries and different people, and don't just network with people who are production riggers. Don't just network with people who are automation technicians. Don't be afraid to reach out to HR managers, to hiring managers, or to executives, or, whoever else, producers, whoever else is on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. It's such a gold mine.
Oh, yeah.
What is the worst and best part about your current job?
The worst part about my current job is that I can't do all the projects that I want to do. We have such volume that runs through TAIT. And every once in a while, there's one that you go, oh God, it's gone. So that's a pretty great worst part to be the worst part of my job. But honestly, that's probably it. Obviously, COVID notwithstanding, a lot around COVID has sucked, but that's not unique to my job. Trying to find enough business to keep everybody employed and keep our family together, our work family together. That's been trying and hard, but that's a challenge worth taking on, obviously. The best part of my job is that I get to do the biggest, craziest, newest, weirdest, dumbest things in the industry. That's by far the best part. I back when we were doing a lot of Cirque Big Top to Arena conversions, which we still do them. There's just fewer of them. Back when we were doing a lot of them, and when the people on those shows were people I had previously been on tour with at Cirque, because I spent 4 years on tour with them, they would be like, "Oh my God, I want to work at TAIT. It seems so cool." And my response would always be the same, which is, look, number one, that can be arranged. That's not hard. Number two, just recognize that what you're going through right now is the creation process, which is what Cirque calls tech. They call it creation. You're going through the creation process right now, and you're getting tired and you're getting frustrated, and you feel like you're under assault. And a couple weeks from now, a month from now, whatever, we're going to open the show, and then you're going to stay on this show for like a year or two, and you're going to recharge your batteries and get bored, and then you're going to come back to a period like the day I leave here. I am going to go get parachuted into another set of circumstances that are just like this. Oh my God, it's never going to work. We're running out of time. What are we going to do? You constantly live that. It's a lifestyle job. It's not for everybody, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. I personally really enjoy that part of it. That the deadline, the trying to achieve an artistic vision that we all agreed to or understood at the beginning. That's the most rewarding part of the job, which unfortunately we haven't gotten in like a solid year now, is going through all that and having that opening night, if it's a rock and roll touring show, of, 20 to 50,000 people going nuts. Obviously they're going nuts for the name on the ticket, but you have participated enormously in the name on the ticket, entertaining them. And hearing that is just, it's fleeting. It's very short, but there's no rush like it. So that I love being in that circumstance and having to make it work with what we've got. It's make it work, That's the most rewarding part.
So given all of that and how this is very much a lifestyle kind of career, COVID notwithstanding, what do you do to maintain a healthy relationship? And I know you've got a little one on the way. So what are you going to do to maintain that balance between work and family life?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard at TAIT for sure. And I think it's hard. I don't think that's unique to TAIT. I think anyone in the entertainment industry, we all work more than we should because we love what we do, right? This is our jobs are a part of our personal identities, right? This is not, we don't work at State Farm, for example, right? This is part of who we are, right? If you ask an entertainment person, what do they do? Or who, tell me about yourself. Something about the entertainment industry will be the first words out of their mouth. That isn't true for it. There's that, and how do you maintain healthy relationships? I mean, it's about setting boundaries, especially at a company the size of TAIT. We have the ability to, and we train people to like raise your hand, wave a white flag and say, I've got too much on my plate. I need help, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Asking for help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. And again, it's a team sport. We're all in this together, right? So if you're failing, that's eventually going to affect me. I am disinterested in you failing, if only selfishly, but hopefully also not self.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about, being able to say, look, I have too much on my plate, or also recognizing that like the work is still going to be there in the morning, right? If you're on site and opening day, tomorrow's opening night and like we have to fix the thing tonight, like, okay, that's a bad example, right? Like, no, you have to work all night. I apologize. But not every day, not every tomorrow is opening night. And recognizing like, hey, I'm going to go home now and I'll be back tomorrow and all of this will still be here tomorrow. I mean, that's a lot of how I did my pilot's license while doing those two enormous shows, was being like, okay, it's 4:30. I booked my class at 4:30. I'm going to leave for 2 hours. I'm going to go fly and then I'm going to come back and work. But I'm going to leave for 2 hours and go do this. And then I'm going to come back here at 6:30 and I'm going to work till 9:30 and then I'm going to go home and go to bed. So it's just make the time, because otherwise you'll be looking back when you're 65 and going, oh man, I wish and that's, as they say, no one on their deathbed ever said, I wish I was at work more.
True. Where can people follow you on social media?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I don't have any, I'm not cool enough to have, this is my professional account and this is my personal account.
Do you want people to follow you?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Please reach out. Normally after I do Event Safety Alliance or USITT or LDI. I get a wave of messages at all the places, and that's more than fine. So I'm Jim Shumway on LinkedIn. I'm Jim Shumway on Facebook. I'm _Jim Shumway on Instagram if you want to see the dogs all the time. And I think that's all of them. That's all the ones I actually check. I'm sure I have a Snapchat. I'm sure someday soon I'll have a TikTok. I do not look at either of those at any real frequency. So
Industry Explorers is the podcast for the young adults who have no idea what they want to do after graduation, undecided majors, burnt out workers, considering a career change, and everyone else in between. With that said, do you have any last-minute words of wisdom or calls to action for our listeners?
It's trite, but it's true. Find a job you love and you'll never work another day in your life, right? Don't assume you are stuck where you are. Like, YouTube exists now. We've never had more instant access to more information in our lives, right? We all walk around with a cell phone in our pocket. You walk around with more computing power than the Apollo 11 capsule had that landed on the moon, right? And not only that, but you are instantly wirelessly connected to the entirety of man's collective knowledge. So don't feel like you need to go to that school or to that class to learn a thing. There's never been a better time to learn a thing. And the other thing that I tell a lot of people at TAIT, to jump back to that a little bit, is, conceptually, if you die tomorrow, your job will be posted online before your obituary. Behave accordingly.
My final question. You thought that was my final question, but it's not. Okay. I discovered this question last night and I can't get over it. I have to ask all my guests this question now at the end, even for my live streams. So, I can't wait for tomorrow's live stream. And then I just ask this person on the spot and they go, "What are you asking me to answer?"
I'm excited.
In an Elmo voice, tell me how you like your coffee.
Wow. I don't drink coffee.
Elmo, what was that?
I don't drink coffee. I don't know. I haven't done Elmo. I don't have a kid yet. I'm about to. I'll be good at Elmo in like 3 years. I'm not good there right now.
Well, this is a great time to practice.
Yeah, I don't drink coffee. I'm like this on just air. I don't take in caffeine on a regular basis.
Do you drink tea?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well,
no.
I'll do it too, just because you're my first guest that I've asked to do this. I like my coffee black, but sometimes I like putting a little bit of sugar in milk.
Your Elmo is far more rehearsed than mine.
I did it. It was so much worse last night when I did it for the first time. That's the best interview question ever. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. When I was at Cirque, I had to interview riggers. I used to ask them, what is the last movie they put on to intentionally fall asleep to?
And what's yours?
And, the last one, I don't know what the last one is, but like Raiders of the Lost Ark is a pretty common one of that for me.
Oh, nice. Do you just know that movie like the back of your hand and you're so familiar with it?
Yeah, it's like a different way of asking what movie are you most comfortable with? Because that's the movie. Not a movie that was so boring you fell asleep watching, but like you were like, "Oh, I need to fall asleep. Let me put this movie on," kind of thing.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense.
The other one I would ask was, what thing in your refrigerator is currently in there that needs to get thrown away that you keep forgetting to throw?
Every week, it's spinach. I forced myself to buy not 2 bags of spinach, but 1, because as much as I say I need the dark leafy greens and I need to include this more in my diet, every week I fail myself. So I only buy 1 bag of spinach, and even then I tend to have left.
Well, then definitely don't buy 2.
It feels weird on my teeth. I don't know what it is about spinach, but like something about it feels weird in my mouth and my teeth, and like it feels gritty. It's essential, but oh man, don't like it.
That's great.
Well, Jim, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure having you. I hope that this episode really helps people who are trying to figure out what it is that they want to do, how to thrive in a certain industry. We've covered so much great stuff. So I'm going to just leave it at that. Explorers, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you check out all the links in the show notes. And until next time, I will see you on our next adventure. Take care. Take what you learned from today's expert and play. You heard me? Go play. Just try something new, because that's the best way to discover your passion and purpose. If you found the episode insightful, Give Industry Explorers a 5-star rating and tell us what you learned in your review. Subscribe to Industry Explorers on YouTube for more adventures. Industry Explorers is made possible by the support and contributions from explorers like you. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on our next adventure.